Shauna Fleischbein with Castle Group. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager for the Greater Tampa, Sarasota region. And I am joined today by Sharif and Daryl of Clark, who have been kind enough to join us and give us a presentation on something that we all deal with here as residents of Florida, those pesky mosquitoes and all their little friends who love to especially annoy us in the summertime. So they're going to give us some education today on how to handle those guys and live, I guess, somewhat peacefully with them, right? So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Daryl and Sharif to educate us today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate everyone taking the time every day to join us this morning. And thank you for the opportunity to present on mosquitoes and midges. Again, my name is Daryl Bajai. I'm the South Florida Control Consultant here in with Clark. And I'm accompanied by Sharif Jackson, who is in Central Florida, goes all the way up to North Florida as well along the East Coast there. And she's going to talk more so about integrated mosquito management and midges on the back end of this presentation. I'm going to kick things off this presentation talking about mosquitoes, mosquito history, and kind of why we're here, what y'all are going to be learning today. So without further ado, we're going to jump into it and talking a little bit about who Clark is, who the company of Clark is. And we're a global public health products and services company, been in business for over 75 years. We're vetted, we're true, do a lot of work with Castle Group and other property management firms across the state and across the nation as well. So we love bringing forth this public health service to communities. And what we do, we are focused on our mission to make communities around the world more livable, safe, and comfortable. And we do that through our vision to create an organization that reaches around the world to help make the lives of more than 660 million people's lives more livable, safe, and comfortable. And that's seen throughout the company from our CEO all the way down to our field technicians with what our core values are. That's caring for the planet, caring for the people, being passionate about what we do. I'm sure if you talk to any Clark representative, they all have a smile on their face when you ask them what they do for a living. And then it's also doing the right thing even when it's hard as well. So everybody in the organization really follows through with that, and it's a great place to work. So on the call, as I mentioned, you have myself, Daryl Pajai, you have Sharif Jackson, and then we also have a counterpart as well, Cale Payne. So he's on the west coast of Florida, all the way up through the Panhandle as well. So at the end of this presentation, you will see our contact information for each of the reps here. So if you do have any questions, you'll have our contact information at the end of this presentation. You can also go to the Clark website and search your area and find your local Clark rep as well, and you get our contact information there. So a little bit more about who Clark's customer base are is typically mosquito abatement districts, counties, municipalities, cities, towns. Those are the kind of folks that we really sell our products to and equipment, but we also offer services to those counties, cities, towns. But more recently, we've been seeing a larger portion of our business in the service department being with the HOAs. It's the communities, it's CDDs, new developers, things like that, where the county programs, special district programs might not be coming directly behind your gates to treat your community roads or taking a backpack behind your individual resident spots or around your pool areas, your common areas for mosquito or midge control. And that's where we step in and provide that supplemental service that the county or city might not be providing you all. And we, have been working with very high-end communities as well, recognizing the type of clientele that some of you all handle in your constituents of your residents. So we have a service that meets all your needs, from high-end communities all the way down to just your basic HOA as well. So we're really versed in meeting what your clients' expectations are, as well as controlling the mosquitoes and midges based off of where they're living. So what are we talking about today? This sign honestly could probably be seen. It should probably be put up and seen all across the state here because mosquitoes are bad, especially this time of year, coming to July, where we have temperatures over 90 degrees. We have frequent rainstorms. And so Florida is just naturally a perfect mosquito type habitat. And then we talk mosquitoes, but also midges. So if you hear the word midge throughout this presentation, and you didn't know what it was, I'm sure if you've ever experienced midges but didn't know what they were called, you're gonna be like, yes, those are what is a big nuisance, big problem in my community or at my home. And so we're gonna talk a little bit more about the biology of them and what we could do to help support you in reducing that overall population. But that's what we're talking about, and this is why we're talking about it. Why is it so important? Because it's hitting home, it's hitting your services, your communities. It's where we live nowadays as Floridians. It's beautiful communities that are getting developed. Developers are meeting such a demand, whereas, almost prior to 2020, we always had seasonal folks coming in from the Northeast or from the North. But now they've really made state of Florida their permanent home year round. And sometimes their expectations of how mosquito control is handled or how flying insects in general are handled is not necessarily the case. And you could see an image like this, looks like a beautiful community, right? I'm personally an outdoors person myself, so I enjoy being around trees, waterways, natural areas. I love it. I also, born and raised in Florida, understand what comes with that type of habitat and wearing bug spray when I go out during the evening or early morning hours, long sleeve shirts, long pants. Um, Other folks might not be as accustomed to that. And so, as we're developing these communities in the areas in which these native um, species like mosquitoes and midges are commonly there living, we have to learn to adjust and live with them as well. But of course, there's things we could do to help make it a little bit more comfortable out there when you're enjoying those walking trails. So you can see we're really developing out into more of these natural areas where mosquitoes and midges live. And then I like showing this image as well, where this one's a little bit more built out, probably not as much of that natural swampy area that you might think of when you think of like Florida Everglades or anything else like that, but your typical community neighborhood here. Um, Sharif's going to mention a little bit more and talk more about the midge biology and behavior. But you can see an image like this where you have everybody sold that waterfront property. There really isn't much of a barrier, whether that be fence or vegetation, from the person's back door to that water's edge. And so when natural insects like midges hatch off from these stormwater bodies, there's nowhere else for them to go other than to your screen, to your back door, which is why you probably feel it more so. So again, that's just a reality of the way in which some of our communities are being developed these days and where we're living. So again, there's things we can do to help suppress that and reduce that overall midge population. Now, this is a reality. What we have here on the screen is an actual image of a map for a community in which we service. As you can see, it's CBD that's still being developed out there. And you can see, new homes, new construction getting built over there on the left side of the image. But you can already see homes fully developed where people are living, surrounded by wetland habitat natural areas. And when these developers create these new communities, oftentimes there's permit and regulatory requirements to keep natural areas. Again, I'm all for it. I love natural areas. I think it's beautiful. Keep what native wildlife could be there and sustained in there. But nonetheless, mosquitoes are there as well. And when you're buying that home, you might not be looking, over the fence or exactly what's right behind you. But quickly you might learn if you live there year round how mosquitoes really don't know boundaries. They don't know to stay within their natural area, preserve spot, but they're going to get out and they're going to fly and might be in your front yard or your backyard there. So, this is again just the reality of where we're at when it comes to these newer communities being developed here in Florida. So, like I mentioned, we have high temperatures, we have a lot of rain. That means a lot of mosquitoes are hatching off. With the mosquitoes come some mosquito bites, and with that might come some angry phone calls from residents or constituents towards you. So we want to prevent that equation there. and try to reduce that mosquito population coming off. So we're going to talk about the history of Florida mosquito control, talk about mosquito biology, vector-borne diseases as well. So we always think maybe mosquitoes more so as just a nuisance, something you slap on your arm every couple days or so. But there's actually a disease threat that is carried with these mosquitoes as well. We want to make sure that you're educated on that. Then we're going to talk about integrated mosquito management and then look into the midge biology and habitat and also midge control. So being in Florida, sure you all have family members, relatives, other folks who always say, "I'm not going swimming because I'm afraid of getting attacked by a shark." I personally hear it when my cousins from Colorado come down, but nonetheless, we put up this image where people have such a fear of sharks, and yes, be aware in the water. Also goes for alligators, but when you look at unfortunately the death across these animals, it's the mosquito that is the most deadly animal in the world. And so, it's something that we take very serious, which is why we associate ourselves not just as a company, but as a public health company, because they really do pose a disease threat to folks not only worldwide, but here in the state of Florida. So, looking at the history of Florida, again, back in 1838, Florida's first petition for statehood was ratified, and John Randolph of Virginia warned against voting Florida into statehood, saying the land would never be habitable due to swamps, alligators, and mosquitoes. The physical environment of Florida is just made perfect for mosquito habitat because we are so plentiful in water. Um, it's just where they want to live. um, and then in the 18th century, we actually create a portion or called a portion of the state of Florida between the St. Johns River and the coastal lagoons of Cape Canaveral called Mosquito County because the mosquitoes were just so bad. They couldn't think of any better name than just Mosquito County. That's where it was. And right around this time, too, we started seeing cities like Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Tallahassee, and Pensacola also called the malaria belt. So they are already seeing disease activity here in the state of Florida from mosquitoes. Now, fantastic book here. If you do have some free time to read, maybe ChatGPT is working some side things for you that you have 20 minutes to read. There's this book called Mosquito Wars. Highly recommended by Gordon Patterson, and it talks about the history of mosquito control. A lot of it has to do with the disease outbreaks that we were seeing back in the 1880s, which is what this graph is showing you, where in Duval County, with a population of around 26,700, over 10,000 people got yellow fever. So yellow fever is disease spread by mosquitoes. And so you can imagine that large population getting infected by mosquitoes, what that could do to the local economy, local human population, tourism, all that. And even from a public health standpoint, something need to be done to help reduce the spread of yellow fever across the state. So a couple years later, in 1922, the Florida Anti-Mosquito Association, FAMA, which is now commonly referred to as Florida Mosquito Control Association, FMCA, was formed. And it was formed by Dr. Porter, who was the state's first health officer. And so essentially he said, we need to figure out something to keep our residents safe. They need to stay healthy if we want to survive as a state. And so they started looking into all other activities to try to do ditching, dredging, try to remove the standing water off the whole state, and different projects within these counties. And it wasn't until 1925 that Indian River Mosquito Control District was established. And they were the first mosquito control district here in Florida. And proudly to say, 50 years after that first special district, over 52 mosquito control programs were established across the state. And to this day, we continue to have over 50 plus mosquito control ran programs through FDACS, which is the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So it's a state-run program that provides funding to these mosquito control programs across the state, in which they then, tax their own constituents and residents within the county or special district to provide these government public services of mosquito control. And they have their hands full because here in Florida, we have over 80 different mosquitoes in Florida. So not all mosquitoes are the same, which we'll find out here shortly. So looking at mosquito biology and habitats, this is going to be talking a little bit about where you're going to be finding mosquitoes around your neighborhood, around your communities. And no shocker, standing water, freshwater ponds, cattail areas, flooded pastures, swamps, wetlands. These are all freshwater habitats that mosquitoes thrive and do very well in this type of habitat. But some of the more concerning mosquito species that we are challenged with in this field are our container breeding mosquitoes. So these are mosquitoes that live in catch basins, culverts, the tire piles. If you live kind of near a mechanic shop, junkyard, even if you just have some leftover tires sitting in your back shed or garage. Also, just basic containers and pools. I have a toddler now, so I have some toys sitting in the backyard. And if it rains, every other evening, afternoon here, if I don't tip out some of his toys, you could find some LinkedIn videos of me being shocked as to where I'm finding mosquito breeding going on in his little car toys, in areas that I never thought would even capture water, but hold standing water. And I'm not just talking like one or two mosquito larvae. I'm talking dozens plus. So they could breed very quickly around your home if you're not conscious and aware of what to look for. So again, just more examples of potted plants, tree holes, things like that where these mosquitoes are breeding. So look at the mosquito life cycle here. You can notice that the majority of its life cycle is actually spent in the water. So you have the female mosquito that lays her eggs and is going to lay it either in a permanently freshwater area or in a damp, saturated type soil area where the eggs then need to be flooded. And once the eggs are flooded, they are going to hatch. And then you have the mosquito larva. So the mosquito larvae go through four developmental stages from instars 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they typically feed very actively between 1 to 3-ish. And once they're in the fourth stage, they're ready to morph into the pupa. And once they're in the pupa stage, they no longer feed on their filter feeders in the larval stage. Once they're in the pupa stage, they already have everything they need. They're just trying to morph into that adult mosquito that is going to be at the surface of the water and then hatch off. And then from there, good luck. They're the bloodsuckers and you got to try to smack them down the best you can. So here's just another example. As I mentioned, not all mosquitoes are the same. You have Anopheles, Culex, and Aedes. And for us, there's different characteristics in which how we identify what mosquito species we're challenged with. But you can see even their resting positions different. Sometimes the way in which they lay their eggs are different. How they sit in the larval stage in the water is different. And as professionals, those are all small things we look for out in the field to know what mosquito we are challenged with. So, as mentioned, some eggs need permanent standing water, and these are more so your freshwater type mosquito species or your salt marsh mosquitoes, where they lay their eggs right there on the water surface or right at the water line that is going to be either flooded through tidal events and or just through rainfall. And then once it gets flooded, the eggs, and they typically hatch off in about 24 hours. And then it's about 3 to 5 days within that larval stage that the mosquitoes are morphing into that pupa stage. So from the time of the eggs hatching to them actually flying out is somewhere between, 4 to 7 days typically. And then you have your container breeding mosquitoes, which are challenging in itself. Again, not only because they're in cryptic areas, but because their eggs could actually dry out. And then say there's another rain event comes, and then once they get reflooded again, their eggs could actually hatch then. So as I mentioned in my child's toys out back, say it was a small rain event, female laid her eggs, but then the water dried up in 2 days, 3 days. Those eggs are still there on the side of his little car. And once we have a heavy rain event again, those eggs could hatch. And if that water stays, active or, not dried out within 5 days or so, it could produce adult mosquitoes coming out of that type of habitat. So this is what the larval stage looks like. Little wigglers, they're also called. And as I mentioned, they're filter feeders. And so what you're looking at there are, mosquito larvae in different stages. They're very active. So if you walk up to a war body that has mosquito larvae, they're typically right there at the water surface. Now, if they see your shadow or anything else, sometimes they get scared and they'll kind of swim down a little bit further to try to be avoid being seen by you. But either way, that's what they look like in that stage. And then what you have here is your pupa stage, and doesn't look like it's showing there. So we're going to move on to the adult stage. So the pupa stage short anyway. So nothing much happening there other than them hatching off and becoming adults. And so what's unique is that you think, again, all mosquitoes bite. That's not true. The females are the only ones that bite because the females need that blood source to create egg production. And the males, they feed on nectar and honeydew of other plants. So when you're getting bit by a mosquito, you're getting bit by a female mosquito. And then looking at some of the behavior of some of these mosquitoes as well. They have different flight ranges. So you have some mosquitoes that can fly actually like 50 miles or so, your salt marsh mosquitoes. Then you have some mosquitoes that fly about 15 miles, all the way down to a few mosquitoes that fly just a couple 100 feet. So those that fly just a couple 100 feet are typically those that we call container breeding mosquitoes, Culex quincafasciatus or Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus. And what's concerning too is a lot of those mosquitoes that have a short flight range are also the ones that vector a lot of our serious diseases like yellow fever, dengue, um, malaria, Zika. And those are the ones where they're living more or less in around exactly where you're at in your backyard, in front of your house. And if there is disease activity, it's very easy for those mosquitoes to stay around the community because they don't fly very far. Here's just a fun image. If Florida did have a mosquito, this is probably what it would look like. But thankfully, we don't have that mosquito here. So I mentioned Culex quincafasciatus. This is also called the southern house mosquito. It's a very urban type mosquito, and it's one that really got on Florida's radar around 2020, where we saw a huge uptick in our West Nile virus activity in Miami-Dade. Now you think West Nile virus, typically from our profession, you think of mosquitoes that are breeding out in the flooded pasture lands and, way in rural areas where that mosquito species and virus might circulate within the wild bird population. But having West Nile virus in an urban setting like Miami-Dade, we were very curious to see what might happen and why that was happening. It came from this mosquito species, Culex quincafasciatus, and where it was living in the stormwater systems. And so, an area that's very cryptic, tough to find, and plenty of stormwater areas in Miami. A lot of unfortunately, the homeless population that was sleeping out, on benches and parks near these stormwater areas were getting bit by the Culex quincafasciatus, and they were transmitting local West Nile virus. So it's something that we all keep in mind and something within communities. It's a type of habitat that you might just simply walk over literally and not think about, but yet mosquitoes could be breeding right under your feet. And then we have Aedes aegypti. Again, the mosquito that I've been explaining or sharing the story about with my kids' toys in the backyard are Aedes aegypti. I've identified the adults flying around, and they're in areas that are um, very close to where we live, and they don't fly very far. So for me, it's always trying to find where is that source at around my house, and I'm very much a proponent of educating my neighbors as well, because I do know that they do have bromeliads right over my fence. So I talk to my neighbor at least once a week to make sure he's cleaning those bromeliads out. So I'll go through a few fun videos that I've taken actually out in the field, give you some background and context to them. So kind of bring this all real world scenario for you. So you could see the mosquito larva just hanging out right there. This is in leaflet of a bromeliad. And as I zoom out, you can see it is right in front of a nice community. Walking in for board meetings, residents were complaining about getting bit by mosquitoes, and there's some of your culprits. This is another example of scenario. I was walking around my community and noticed that they had a sprinkler leak for a couple days now, but it wasn't a serious leak. It was very slow moving. And you could see all those little mosquito larvae shaking and wiggling. That was just behind the leaf. So as I mentioned, it really doesn't take much water. It was very slow moving, and I could only imagine that that storm drain was just filled with mosquito larvae. But again, an example of how quickly you can find mosquitoes around your neighborhood. This was one where getting complaint calls around the tennis courts and basketball courts, and someone just thought that that's where the cup should go, the trash can. You can see the mosquito larvae there. There was a good handful of mosquito larvae just in that dirty cup that was in a bush. So, an area that you wouldn't think would be breeding mosquitoes, but you could clearly find them and see them right there, and that could be a problem in and around your community. Now, this kind of tough to tell, but there are a lot of mosquito larvae in this area, a couple hundred, if not a couple thousand. And as I zoom out, you'll see this fountain was down for a couple weeks right in front of the first tee box of this community. So a lot of the golfers complaining, hey, what's going on? You know, the mosquitoes seem to be horrendous here. And sure enough, they were breeding right there. And in this image here, you can see I got a lot of different mosquito larvae captured in just one simple dip. So, now let's again talk about some of the potential diseases that these mosquitoes can carry. And I know I started off with a image about the death count between sharks and mosquitoes over the last 100 years. This one puts in the perspective other animals as well. And again, mosquitoes continue to come out as the deadliest animal. Now, because we're a public health company and take that very seriously, we partnered with Dr. Jonathan Day from the University of Florida. And during the active rainy season, mosquito season here in Florida, he provides disease updates through our website, through a newsletter he puts together. So if you're interested in looking at this newsletter, learning more about it, and getting signed up on our newsletter email list, go to Clark's website. You could find us under learning and look for Dr. Day's disease activity report, and you could, stay informed as to what's going on around your community. Now, all this kind of seems big picture, so what does this have to do with you and me? Well, mosquito-borne diseases any part of the world these days. The way in which we travel is so easy. Just literally at our fingertips through our phones, we could book travel across seas. The way in which we're getting goods and services, products are being shipped all over the world, and these mosquitoes are hitchhikers. They could come into a container from another part of the world, show up here in Florida, and thrive just fine. You don't know what kind of disease that they are bringing. And same thing for humans as well. We go visit these beautiful other locations, don't know, if we get bit by a mosquito over there, if it was the food, or if I actually got bit by a mosquito that I'm bringing back some dengue or yellow fever or something like that. Because that's very common where we have travel related disease activity here in the state of Florida. And that travel related to then could turn into local disease cases. So looking at malaria, and unfortunately, it was in the news back in 2024. So something I never thought I'd actually see in my profession here in South Florida, seeing disease activity, but in the Sarasota, Hillsborough area, there was active malaria cases. So very serious and concerning disease that it was common back in 2024. We had about 8 total cases. Thankfully, I don't believe there was any mortality from this disease, but it's one that really left a lot of people ill and left a lot of people questioning, how their mosquito control program is, how effective it really is, and how they could do a better job of keeping the residents safe. So this is an image showing how an infected mosquito bites a person, it infects the liver, into the blood cells goes that malaria, and then that mosquito bites another infected person, and it kind of keeps the circulation going. So infected person is bit by a mosquito, that mosquito then goes bites another person and infects that person, and the cycle continues. So malaria is definitely one that we're most concerned about. It's the one that leads to the most mortality globally. And so it has a lot of challenges associated with it because of the mosquito that vectors it. It's a very challenging to control mosquito species. And even if you don't die from it, the symptoms of catching malaria are very uncomfortable, from fevers, chills, sweats, headaches, body aches, just a really uncomfortable setting for somebody to go through. And then you have dengue fever. So this one's very common in the South Americas, and very common actually, unfortunately, here in Florida, where we have a lot of travel related cases. Now, about 90% of the infections are asymptomatic, so you don't even know if you're carrying this virus, but it's something that folks need to be aware of, because whereas you might be asymptomatic, you get bit by a local mosquito around your neighborhood, and then that mosquito goes bites another person. That person might actually feel the effects of the dengue fever. So again, here's some statistics from last year. We are looking at over 423 travel-related cases and over 60 local cases. So, that's a lot of folks falling ill to this virus, and one that we want to continue to work on reducing the best we can within the local communities. And these are areas as well where we're starting to see more cases of the dengue virus. Now, primarily down there in South Florida, and it's starting to migrate north. And actually, what you're seeing with that disease cases starting to migrate north is the mosquito species is actually migrating north. So this virus is typically spread by Aedes aegypti, where that mosquito population doesn't actually have a really good foothold the further north you go. But as we're seeing changes in climate temperature, as we're seeing changes in our physical environment, like I mentioned, this is a mosquito that likes more urbanization, communities, developments, roads, things like that, not so much to open pasture, rural areas. As we change Florida to be almost more like a Miami or more like a South Florida with shopping centers and HOAs, the mosquitoes migrating further north, which is bringing up that disease threat the further north. So that's what you're seeing kind of there. And we continue to see it across the states as well, where other states that didn't even have Aedes aegypti as a threat or as a mosquito population in their state, it's a very much a dominated mosquito species in more urban areas in states that they never had it just 5, 10 years ago. And how this works again, infected person is bit by a mosquito. That mosquito takes that infected blood meal, goes bites another person, and then that infected blood is now into that person, and the cycle could continue. Now, this was a really strange one. I'm sure everyone remembers Zika. Something that came about in 2016. And you can see there where in 2015 we had 0 cases of Zika. It wasn't even a problem. We heard about it over in Brazil and Puerto Rico around 2015 time period, but saying, well, that's not here. That's not going to come here. Well, short 12 months later, we had over 5,000 cases, and we were scrambling to try to figure out how to stop it. Now, unfortunately, the transmission route for Zika was not very unique to other mosquito cycles, how we saw where it goes from mosquito to mosquito and back around. This one could actually be transferred from human to human through sexual transmission. Unfortunately, the mother, if she was pregnant and had Zika, could also pass it on to her newborn baby, if possible, as well, and also through blood transfusion. So, aside from just get bit by a mosquito and then passing it to another person once it bites them, this disease route was very unique and one that we were very alarmed at. Since then, we've seen Zika taper back off and get back to that zero number. So we're still trying to figure out what happened there for that time period of about 2 to 3 years where we continue to see Zika cases, but see it shortened out or fizzled out throughout these years. And then finally, West Nile virus, I mentioned it with some of the success story, or not success stories, unfortunately, some of the real world stories that happened here in 2020, where again, you get flu-like symptoms when getting West Nile virus. Sometimes it could lead to comas or death. Um, it could also paralyze. It impacts the nervous system. So it's a really serious disease. I'll continue to harp on just the backyard challenge, uh, pool toys, bird baths, potted plants, things like that around your neighborhood is where some of these mosquitoes are living. And a lot of those are the mosquitoes that are vectoring these diseases. And we see the human effect here as well. Like I mentioned, the physical environment's changing. We're no longer in, rural areas where flood pasture fields or anything else. We are developing Florida from coast to coast, and it's ever changing. So our approach, our communities need to adapt to the change as well. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over now to Sharif Jackson. She could go ahead and tell us a little bit more about our integrated mosquito management approach.
All right. Okay, I was making sure that my screen was starting to move. It's moving very slowly. It's very weird. All right, good. Still morning, everybody. Sharif Jackson. So you've heard a lot about where mosquitoes come from, what kind you have in Florida, who's trying to eat you, who's not, and what the real threat is, which is the disease. They are definitely irritating, but there is a real disease threat. And it's interesting because of where we are. We have what we call the first world problem of kind of being so separated from the idea of how many people mosquitoes kill every year that we don't think about it anymore. So now I'm going to talk about how we have culled that problem and made it able for you to live in Florida and people to come travel here and have a good time. So we use something called integrated mosquito management, and that is a whole full process of figuring out where the mosquitoes are, mapping them, keeping up with them, treating for them at a larval stage and adult stage, and then doing what we're doing right now, which is educating the community on how to protect themselves and how to kind of keep the problem down from their standpoint, because like you said, they could be breeding in your backyard. So in educational points, of course, there's webinars and things like this. We also provide a lot of physical flyers, door hangers, things like that, that will talk about the disease threats, what you can use to protect yourself, like different mosquito control products as far as at home products will have different active ingredients in it. Some people prefer like natural oils and things. So there's flyers from us, from the CDC, that you can find with that kind of information, and you can always share with the people in your community. So let's talk about the survey and mapping part. So what you're looking at here is a real map that we have where, again, to be able to treat mosquitoes, you have to know where they're coming from. So for instance, you have, I guess it's on a timer. Weird. So you could have mosquitoes coming from a specific area, and then, well, based on the mosquitoes you have, you know where they're coming from because they're mosquitoes that are coming from a swamp or they're coming from backyards, depending on the type. So we survey that, and also we survey where they could be breeding. So, for instance, there's areas in a neighborhood that always have water. It's a retention or detention pond. But then you have places like ditches that only have water once it's rained for a couple of days. So we want to distinguish between those different types of sites. So when we're doing inspections, we know whether to check the site all year round or if we need to check up on it only when it's kind of the rainy season. And next, you'll see surveillance. Oh, maybe I'll do it a different way. Surveillance and move. There we go. More survey mapping. So we also treat catch basins. Like you said, a lot of people don't realize that mosquitoes can breed in catch basins. And how many might you have in your community? 100 and something, 200. And so we map those as well if we're going to do catch basin treatments, and then we'll do treatments there as well. Yes. So it's just a little funny because again, you have to, I mean, it's very investigative to figure out where mosquitoes are coming from and the best ways and where to treat them. So yes, you have to have that skill set and be able to use it. So looking at the surveillance, you can do surveillance for the larvae, that stage before they come out and start biting, but then also for the adults as well. I do all the above, and boy. So, surveillance and monitoring. So, you're looking at what we're doing here is analyzing the distribution and density of those mosquitoes. So, for instance, we put a trap out and we can see that, they are the most active at 11 o'clock. And so we know to try to time our spraying for around 11 o'clock when they are most active and flying around because you want to get as many as possible at that time. And the same thing, just because there is a body of water doesn't mean it's brooding mosquitoes or that it's breeding mosquitoes. So that's why you have to actually check those waters for larvae to be swimming around because you don't want to put product into that water and there's nothing there. You're not treating for anything. There are some pre-hatch products that we know that mosquitoes often come here, so we can put it out before we even see them. So those products do exist. But in general, if there's never been an issue in that area, there's no reason to put out product there if there's nothing there. So you definitely want to do your due diligence with checking for the larva and for the adult mosquitoes. So looking at larval control, again, most of their process is within water. So there are liquid larvicides, there are little granular larvicides, which sometimes look a little bit like dog food or a lot smaller, maybe a smaller animal food in granules. And then we also do tablets. So in storm drains, often we use tablets that will kind of dissolve over time where water is constantly coming through. And again, we also have products that are OMRI listed, which means Organic Material Review Institute. They are labeled organic and saying that if you use this in or around organic plants or crops or anything, that they would still keep that label of organic. And so those products do exist in the industry. The products have definitely changed over time. We're definitely not using the technology that we used in 1940s or 1925 when you first started having kind of organized mosquito control. So we're always, all the vendors that are in this market are always looking for products that are going to be more effective, but also have less footprint in the environment. So I know for us particularly, we do have several of these OMRI listed products that we usually use in our services. And that usually gives homeowners a little more peace of mind. So adult control is the opposite side. This is when they're already biting and people are already complaining, and I can't go outside my house after dusk. So in this case, we use a couple of different practices. So we can do ULV by truck, and again, different technology than way back then. I've heard the stories when back when they're using stuff like DDT, which of course is no longer on the market. So we're not using that kind of stuff anymore. But they do these huge, huge clouds coming from the trucks. And again, people were a little reckless back in the day, so I've heard stories about kids driving their bikes behind trucks that are spraying the fog. And even now, there are people who are like, I think it'll kill my fleas, and they'll try to get behind the trucks to hold up their dogs and stuff. Yeah, very special things going on out there. It's like, please don't do that. It does not kill fleas. But it's different than back then. So we do something called low dosage, ultra low volume applications. So you can almost kind of see it in the picture. There's a very, very light mist, and once it goes out, it spreads and then it's gone. You don't even see it anymore. And so they're very, very small droplets. The mosquitoes are very, very small. So you don't need super heavy droplets. You need really small ones that can hit as many as possible and get as much as the population as possible. So you're putting low volume out there and very low dosage of active ingredient within every single droplet. So it's definitely not the mosquito control of years before. We also use ATV, so we can actually drive right around the edge of a pond or off-road down trails and things like that. It's very convenient. And then we can also do ULV work by backpack, but we also use those for barrier work as well. So the barrier treatments are usually different products that are used for repelling mosquitoes for up to 7 days. So we do those at clubhouses, around pool areas, maybe a playground, picnic areas where you know people are going to be sitting around outside for a while, not just kind of passing through. Those are very good for that. Also for special events, because we've done, there's a wedding outside and we'll come and treat that area maybe the day before or that morning before. We've done festivals, 4th of July, things like that. Just going to do a movie screening outside. So we'll do treatments to areas like that when we know people are going to be sitting outside for a while and you want to have that extra protection for a few more days. So, also, a lot of people don't know how much tracking is involved in the services that we do. And so, all of our trucks have GPS systems, and also those trucks are connected to a software system that is monitoring what products they're putting out. So, at any given moment, we can tell you that, hey, our trucks were, when they came to the community, he was on this street at this time, he was flowing at this rate with this many ounces per minute coming out, and this is how fast he was going. And then also at the end of the day, we know if he used all the product that he was supposed to use and that kind of thing. Also, our systems are often set so that they spray depending on how fast or slow they're going. So if he's going a little faster, you want it to come out a little faster. But if he's going slower, it's going to come out a little slower as he goes across his rate. So if he's going too slow, it'll just stop spraying because it assumes he's at a stop. If he's going too fast, it can also shut off spraying so they don't assume he's going down the highway or something. So there's lots of control mechanisms within mosquito control now to make sure that we're doing things efficiently and effectively, and that there are checks and balances on what all the many technicians are doing when they're out in the field. So it's just good to know for us that people are doing what they're supposed to do, and also our equipment is working the way it's supposed to, so that we are effective in doing our job. So, how can you help us help you? Very important information. Like he talked about tip and toss, anything can be holding water. And so I've seen homes that love planting and they have all these little plants all around their house sitting on these flower pots that are sitting in water. And so you have to be cognizant of that. I know I don't even go in my backyard as much as I used to now that my kids are a little bit older, but there used to be a whole lot of toys and things like that, shovels and wheelbarrows and everything else. So tipping and tosses is the number one thing you can do to make sure you're not breeding around your house. Cleaning your gutters. I'm literally looking for someone to do that right now. But again, we don't pay attention to it. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind until there's a problem. So you definitely want to keep those unclogged and removed. Changing water in bird baths and wading pools. Sometimes it's harder to do that because you can't literally tip it and toss it. But for a lot of things, even some of those plants, you can actually take a hose or something and spray out the water. Some of the bromeliads that hold water is like, well, as long as you get out the water that was already there, anything that was there is going to die. So, but of course, cleaning your pools, keeping it covered, and those kind of things. And then if you have ornamental pools, like Daryl showed earlier, having those mosquito eating fish will help. If you can fill drains and ditches that you know are just consistently going to be a problem, like what is it going to do for you at this point? Tree filling tree holes. There are species of mosquitoes that breed in tree holes, and that's where they go. So all of these things that hold water can be a problem. So whatever you can seal up and fill will also decrease the problems that you have either around your home or just in community as a whole. And so again, some of you will be out there, or some of your residents will be out there riding bikes or doing whatever. They are the best way to get back to you and say, hey, this is what I saw. This thing was holding water. Can we do something about it? Because they're out there every day. And then irrigating lawns responsibly. Again, we're in a drought, so we need more water. But usually, if you get too much irrigation, like you said, it starts riding down the road and you have a little river coming down the street, and then you have extra water problems. So if we are responsible and cognizant of how much water we're putting out and then where that water is going when we're irrigating our lawns and gardens, that will be very, very helpful in keeping that mosquito population down. So there are a lot of resources out there that will be easy for you to share with the community without paying for it or something. This is a video from Florida Department of Health. It's on YouTube. Let's see if it shows.
Day and night, so protect yourself with these tips. Keep mosquitoes outside by shutting doors and covering windows with screens. Use EPA-approved insect repellents anytime you're outdoors. Cover your skin with long sleeves and pants. Mosquitoes lay their eggs in water. Just a bottle cap of water is all they need. So drain, refresh, or cover anything around buildings that can hold water at least weekly and put away outside items that aren't being used. A message from the Florida Department of Health.
See, short and sweet. You can have that on your website. And so the Florida Department of Health will share things. The CDC shares things. There's an organization called the American Mosquito Control Association. There's also a Florida Mosquito Control Association. So if you follow any of those on LinkedIn, you will get information that you can just pass on our website, we have blogs and news and stuff like that that you can share as well. So the information is out there. We provide articles for community newsletters, so we can do that for you too. So, fun time, midges. So, a lot of you will have never seen this before, and you're just very lucky. But for those who have been in communities that have them or lived at a home that was on the water that has them, you know how miserable they can make people. So, midges are true winged, true flies. They're called blind mosquitoes sometimes. Chizzywinks is the funniest one that I've heard. But there are over 300 types in Florida. We see usually about two kinds in Central Florida, and even in South Florida is a main kind that we've seen, but there are quite a bit of them. So they look like mosquitoes, not mosquitoes. They have a similar life cycle to mosquitoes where they lay eggs, they have larvae, the pupae, and then go into adults. But again, they don't bite. The ones that you're going to see around here don't bite, but they come out by the tens of thousands. So this entire life cycle is 3 to 9 weeks. And so again, you can have them hatch off by the thousands, mate and die, and a couple weeks later they're back. Or months later, it's like, I thought they were gone and now they're back. So all of this is very temperature dependent, and Florida just has the best temperature for everything to grow and live and survive. So, we're not getting rid of them anytime soon. So one type is the midge larva or edge larva. These live in that area right around the edge of the pool. That's where their larvae are. So sometimes when I'm looking for them, I'll look for these bloodworms within the soil. They're hard to find just because, again, a pond is so big, I could be looking at the wrong part. So the best way to find out what kind of midge you have usually is just looking at the adults. That's the easiest. But they breed in wetlands, those retention and detention ponds, lakes, wastewater treatment plants, and polluted water. Oh, I went back. And then you have midge adults. So they have a light, kind of a little bit of a green look to them. From a distance, they look like mosquitoes. Until it's right up on you, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that it's not a mosquito. But they literally come out by the tens of thousands. They mate, they lay eggs and die. That's it. Outside of being food for other insects in the environment, I haven't seen any use for them. They are not going to pollinate anything or anything like that. But that's what they do. Now, there's another type of midge, which what we call phantom midge or Chiobores. They lay their eggs and they come out of the deeper part of the water. So it's much harder to treat because you need a product that's actually going to go through the water column in the middle of the pond. And some of those ponds can be fairly deep. Still a nuisance. They're even more populous than the edge midges. So if they're tens of thousands, maybe they're 50,000. But yeah, they again come out by a lot. Now, like I said, they don't bite. There are people who have said they've seen like fish, smelled a fishy odor when there's been a lot of dead ones because again, they come out, they lay eggs, when they mate, they lay eggs, they just start to do it again and they die. So midges that showed up on Monday might be dead by Thursday. Um, the indirect problem is they attract spiders because there's so many of them, and then it's like, every spider in the neighborhood, there's food over there. And so there have been residents that reported more spiders on their house because of coming for the midges. So I feel like that's the worst part of it because I don't do spiders. And this is a picture, I think the World Series in 2007, the midges got so crazy they had to pause the game for a while and spray everybody down. Not sure how helpful that was, but because they're not mosquitoes, but it helped. So this is what your resident will see. They come into their patio and they want to sit and look out the pond, and that's what they're seeing. Like, oh my gosh, what is this? Please get rid of them. So like I said, when I said thousands and tens of thousands, not exaggerating that at all. So if you get residents who are like, oh, the mosquitoes are just thousands of them, they're everywhere. They probably don't have mosquitoes. Because while we have a lot of mosquitoes in Florida, you're usually not going to have that many on somebody's screen just sitting out there hanging out. It's probably midges. So there are different ways to do surveillance. Larval surveillance is very expensive, especially if you're talking about the key aboard ones, because you're talking about taking a boat out into the pond and digging up the bottom and dredging soil and all that. The adult surveillance is usually the easiest way to go. You can visually see them. We can set traps for them, but going out into a pond and doing all you see here is just time consuming and expensive. When you have adults flying around, you know you have midges. Like it's not really very cryptic. The way we treat them is pretty much the same we do mosquitoes. You have larval treatment where we treat the water. There's some different products that we use for midges versus mosquitoes sometimes, depending on the type. The problem is because there's no health threat, there's not a lot of companies putting money into figuring out better ways to treat for midges, where mosquitoes have a disease threat. So luckily, a lot of the products for mosquito control can be used for midges too. So a lot of the same products, some of the same products for larval control, pretty much the same products for adult treatment. We do prefer to use an ATV for these treatments because you can go right around the pond and catch them where they're coming out of, and then get some of that drift on the homes where you can kill the ones resting on the homes, and then doing berry treatment. So it's pretty much the same. So important to note that ponds don't have to be murky looking to have midges. They may appear clean from the surface, but there's still the right nutrients and things within the pond to make it a good habitat for midges. So don't think, oh, it looks good. It shouldn't be a problem because you never know. So how do you partner with us in keeping the midge population down? One, decrease fertilizer runoff. I know you don't always do your own treatments. You could have a lawn care company, but you just want to make sure they're aware that it's important that they keep some of that fertilizer and chemical treatments out of the pond. If you're doing it yourself, again, be careful about letting the stuff that you're treating your lawn with run off into the water. Minimize light. So while they're super busy running around in the daytime, at night they will actually swarm towards light. So if you have lights that aren't motion activated, they're on all the time, that's a beacon in the dark. I would close my blinds at night. So if you're still running around the house at night and you have lights on, they're not seeing right into your window and saying there's light there and head that direction. You can also change the type of light you have, keep them more yellow and not white, using sodium lamps, so less attractive light sources. Fish stocking is good for midges just like it is for mosquitoes. They will eat the larvae in the water. So that's a good idea. Aeration. So a lot of companies will get aerators or fountains, something that'll keep the oxygen moving through the water and everything's constantly moving around. That's a deterrent. And then lastly, vegetation management. So there's something called littoral plants. A lot of times they look like, I mean, they're not like flowering or anything and look extra pretty. So some people don't like them, but it will soak off the runoff that's coming from people's lawns and it helps that plant grow. And that means those extra nutrients aren't just sitting in the water. The other good thing about the plants is that if you do decide to stock fish, the fish have a little place to hide from some of the other predators that might be in the water. So yeah, you definitely don't want to get mosquito fish and then get other fish that'll eat them. But if they're already there, it does give them a little bit of place to hide. So they work well together. So, what's the benefits of doing a program like this? Whether it's for mosquitoes or midges, individually, a homeowner can spend up to $400 a year with their pest control company spraying their backyard. I used to be on the pest control side of I guess the home care kind of industry, and for about $30 a month, you can add on a lot of different services to your pest control, but that can add up for an individual homeowner. On the other hand, we partner with the HOA as a whole to come through with a truck that would spray the entire neighborhood or ATV that will spray the entire neighborhood, treat the actual the larvae where they are in the ponds and ditches and things like that. And so collectively, the community could pay less having a full neighborhood program and get better service than each person individually having their own program. And so, just being in the wild and being a homeowner myself, and gosh, everything adds up when you need somebody to cut your grass and pest control and maybe, manage your pool or something like that. You want to get as much as you can for your money, right? So, of course, this usually isn't in anybody's budget. Nobody's thinking about midge control until they pop up. It's just how it is. Mosquitoes are there, but most people don't know you can do anything about it, not as a community. So, I mean, our boss would always say, if you just put $1 in your budget for, mosquito or midge control or whatever, in the future, you can shift things around to that line item if you need it. Anyone who's been in an organization where you have to do with budgets, you know that you can't just always take money and shift it around. But if you have a line item, it makes it easier. So with all of that, it's 12 o'clock. So I do want to thank everybody for your attendance and see if anyone has any questions. I don't think I saw anything come up earlier, but if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to answer those.
Yeah, any last minute? Well, while we're waiting to see if anybody has questions, I want to thank you both for being here today. As always, we love working with you guys and having you educate everyone on our little pests here that we deal with in Florida. So thank you again, guys. Like I said, we will send out email to everybody who registered with a link if you want to share this presentation and the file for the presentation itself, and it'll have the contact information for everybody here. Yep, there we go. We've got Sharif, Kale, Daryl. We'll include that as well in the email. So depending on where you are in the state, because we did have a number of people registered from all throughout the state. We had some South Florida, some North Florida, some West. So we'll include everybody's info. So depending on where you are, if you want to reach out, you can. And Leah said she learned a lot. Thank you so much. Gary is asking, what is the best fish for combating midges?
There's one called gambusia fish that most of the programs we know will create little farms for and even give out to the residents. Sometimes you can actually get those from the county if your county has a fish stocking program. But gambusia is one that's most common.
Yeah, and also like almost like crappie or like shell crackers, bluegills. Those are also smaller fish that prey on some of the midge larvae as well.
Okay, there you go. Man, it looks like that's it. So thank you guys again. We appreciate you. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your week.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you. Y'all
care,
have a great
everyone.
rest of your day.